What's going on, everybody? Welcome to JohnnyVTV Live, episode 70. On this Saturday, February 25th, we had a great show yesterday on Breaking Bet. The second overall brought in Matt Grissom to talk some college baseball lines. A little bit hit or miss. We really got hosed on Southern Miss, so apologies to anybody that took that parlay. Really surprised that an All-American like Tanner Hall got beat up like that, but we're going to touch into that in just a minute. Join with me, my co-host, Joey Calabrese. Joey Cals, what's up, man? How you doing?
How we doing?
Man, it's living the dream, bro. Living the dream. It was yesterday.
Your Twitter page. Now I'm starting to see what you were saying about college baseball. It could be a lot of fun.
It is. People don't. So the whole thing is, right? People are like, "Oh, college baseball. It's not a big market. It's a small market." Well, it's not going to just get big if nobody ever, does it or talks about it. And, it's another thing that's got to be grown. Like, that's just how it is. And, college baseball is a slower climbing game than a lot of these other sports. But I think ultimately there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of money to be made, and it's enjoyable because a lot of times you're watching future MLB superstars. Like, I watched a handful of yesterday where I'm like, these guys are going to be studs in the major leagues. And, I feel like people kind of, they don't realize that. Like, sure, not everybody's going to pan out. That's just how it works. But a lot of these guys are. A lot of these guys are going to be really good in the big leagues. And I feel like if people just give it a chance a little bit more, and people get interested more down, towards the tournaments, right? The conference tournaments, and obviously the regionals, the super regionals, and the College World Series. But if you get into it before, you can kind of see the maturation. That's really how you get an edge in this game. So before, Joe, we get into the picks of today and highlighting some of the games, let's just talk about quickly yesterday, recap this Friday, the best and worst of the college baseball slate. So I'm going to start. The best had to be Maryland. The big upset, I called it, got it at 205, and, there was 185s out there. Jason Savacool, top 20 pitcher in the NCAA. He brought it, man. 7 innings, 1 earned run, 9 punchies against the defending national champion Ole Miss Rebels. Maryland, they hit a couple taters, bro. Grand slam. They put up a 9 spot against Jack Doherty and this Ole Miss team, which is like something me and Matt Grissom talked about yesterday on Breaking Bet, that like this Ole Miss starter you had to get to in order for Maryland to win. So that was a big W. We're going to be touching on that game as well. And then I would probably say the worst is Southern Miss. They had an All-American Tanner Hall on the mound, a guy who's going to be one of the top pitchers off the board this year in the MLB draft. A first rounder, obviously. He got lit up, dude. He got lit up. And, it wasn't against the big schools, against Illinois. Like, come on, dude. Like, in what planet is that going to happen? And, like, Hall last year did have a couple of those performances where he just didn't have it. And the problem with a team like Southern Miss, and, like, they're a good team, don't get me wrong. Like, they're going to probably make it to the regionals and maybe even the supers, depending on what kind of a draw they get. But their hitting is very questionable. And that was one of the concerns that I had last night when it comes to, betting a team like Southern Miss that's so pitching focused. If your pitcher has a bad outing, can your offense make it up and deliver and pick him up? And the answer was a resounding no when they let up over 10 runs yesterday to an Illinois team. It's just not a good start.
I want to get your opinion on the opposite end of the spectrum before we go into the games for today. You talk about teams that are pitching dominant, one-sided. How about TCU losing 10-1 to Florida State?
I'm glad you brought that up. So that was another game we touched on. And, I made it very clear yesterday. And I was on TCU money line, so, that was a loss. But we also, Matt and myself, we also had the over. I got lucky on that one because it was I grabbed the 9.5 on DraftKings. And he was telling me on a couple other books, he saw some of it was out to 10.5, 11.5, which was like, that was value, where it's like there's a 2-run gap on different books. Like, that's why I took the over, even though typically like a Friday night under. Like, that one, we got lucky because it was like 1-0 after 6 innings, and they managed to have like a 4-run top of the 9th. Florida State did, and that cashed the over. But that's very disappointing because TCU's pitching is not good. Their starter, their ace guy last night threw really well overall, Ryan Vanderhey. But outside of him, their starting pitching is questionable. I think they should be throwing Cam Brown today. He didn't do that well last Saturday. And I'm not really certain that TCU is the team people think they are. Sure, they can hit. They do have a wagon for an offense. But look what happens. What's going to happen when you go against one of these power arms later in the season? When you go against guys from Tennessee or Florida or Wake Forest. Jackson Baumeister, he's a good pitcher. Like that's like what was part of the handicap last night. But I was surprised. I didn't think their offense was going to do anything. And, he shut them down. And TCU is not a tough offense, or TCU is not an easy offense to shut down. And he comes in, and he was phenomenal. But I still would have thought they would have been able to get to him. And, when you got guys better than Baumeister, what's going to happen with TCU? Because they're going to face a lot better arms. If they hope to have big dreams this year, they really have to step it up. And I did not like the effort I saw. And, today, again, they're favorites again, minus 120, the slight favorite with an 11.5 run total. I mean, I'm completely off that game. I have no interest in that, but I think it's a wake-up call for the Horned Frogs. And that's a big win for Florida State and Link Jarrett. And, we were talking yesterday about how Florida State's rebuild, people I think maybe are kind of expediting how well it's going to be in the first year. Like Link Jarrett's a great coach. He was at Notre Dame, beat Tennessee in the Super Regionals. And, I kind of felt like their success was going to be manifested next year or the year after, not this year. But that just goes to show what kind of a coach Link Jarrett is, having his guys prepped and ready early in the season in year one of his tenure at Florida State.
So let's move into the games today. We're going to start with the number one team in the country, LSU, coming out of the gate hot. Minus 240 favorites, minus 2.5 on the run line at Iowa. Who's plus 195? Why don't you talk about that? Oh, and the over-under is 12.5.
So this is the Round Rock Classic. Iowa lost to Sam Houston yesterday. That was on our card. I did that for half a unit. They purposely threw their Saturday guy yesterday because they knew they were getting LSU today. They wanted to have their ace, Brody Brecht, their Friday guy. He throws 100 miles an hour. He's a two-sport athlete. He plays football and he plays baseball. So, it's really disappointing, though, because I wanted to bang Iowa on a plus money smash, but they couldn't put up any runs against Sam Houston yesterday. So even though LSU's throwing probably their weak link of their pitching staff, starting-wise, Riley Cooper, who's still pretty good, by the way, because you got to be good to be starting at LSU, how are they going to score runs? Like, I don't know how they're going to score. But, like, based on how college baseball goes and sports goes, they get shut out by Sam Houston yesterday, but they're going to end up putting, like, 6 runs today on LSU. Watch that happen. I can't in good conscience take the money line. I can't do it as much as I want to, even though I thought it was crazy that Iowa opened at a plus 180 favorite today. They're out to 195, which to me is still, like, they should be in the 250 range. I'm surprised. So the book's giving them a lot of respect today. But I think the under 12.5 is probably the best play. LSU got stymied yesterday for the most part. Owen Barama was sensational for Kansas State. And then once the relievers got brought in, that's when they started doing the damage. LSU's capable of having a 5-6 run inning. And that's kind of what happened. But I think if Brody Brecht does his thing, goes 6-7 strong, we can sneak this under, because I just don't know if Iowa's going to put up more than a couple runs, on paper. I think why 12.5 is just a little too high.
So how do you feel about the 14.5 in the next game? Now, we got Maryland and Ole Miss, right? And you mentioned the game before. Maryland popped a couple. Ole Miss didn't look good. Maryland's plus 175 on the money line. Ole Miss is minus 215. Run line's minus 1.5. Do you think that's going to be a bounce back game for the 4th ranked team in the country?
No. So I'm going back to the well here. I locked it in probably 30 minutes ago at plus 185. That's the only place I saw it at. And dude, Maryland, I'll give the same breakdown that I did yesterday. Fine. Jason Savacool's not pitching for the Terps, but they have Nick Dean. He's a solid senior. He's got a lot of experience. He's a I would probably give him top 35, top 40 pitchers in the country. He's not a guy that's probably ever going to be an ace in the big leagues, but he's a guy who he knows what it takes. He knows what his team expects of him. And it's the same principle. Maryland yesterday was able to hit Jack Doherty, who is probably their Sunday guy. He's not a Friday guy starter because Hunter Elliott got hurt and is awaiting, MRI results. I think the total is something I'm staying off of because I could see the freshman from Ole Miss, Grayson Saunier, making just his second start of his college career, get roughed up by a Maryland team that has a lot of power. And, I didn't watch Saunier pitch last week, to be honest, so I don't really know exactly what he's working with, if I'm being totally honest. But, Ole Miss obviously trusts him enough to have him in the starting rotation this early. I just think against a power team like Maryland, he might struggle today. That's why I'm going back to the well, thinking that this plus 185 number that I got, even plus 175, is still too large. Like, you're going to give me almost 2-1 for a team that put up 9 runs on Ole Miss the night before, with the freshman just making his second start. His first start last week was against Delaware. This is his first big test. And Nick Dean's been here before. So I trust Nick Dean in this spot more than I do Grayson Saunier. And I don't know if I can buy Ole Miss at this price. And I think the total, I could definitely see Maryland put up a 10 or 11 piece if they're hitting on all cylinders like they were yesterday.
So we move from an SEC team that has lost to an SEC team right now that hasn't lost yet, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
no, they did lose.
Florida
this team
lost?
did lose. Florida blew. Florida was up like 9-3 in the middle of the week to USF, and like USF had like an 8-run top of the 9th inning and came back and won, or bottom of the 9th.
Very fluky.
Very fluky.
So they're the big favorites. They beat Cincinnati yesterday. They're favorites again today, minus 335. Run line's 3.5, and the over-under is 13.5, right? So if you want to take Cincinnati for an upset special, that's plus 260. So how do you feel about Florida here? Are they going to sweep them?
I think Florida should sweep him. I was a little tentative yesterday when they put the line out. The problem is, so DraftKings is the big book for college baseball, and like for betting wise, at least, they have to be probably the best book game by game. Caesars does a little bit here and there, but sometimes they're late with their lines, and sometimes you have to go to like obscure books in Middle America, and a little Bovada does it as well. But for the most part, DK is the go-to book, and they kind of pick and choose which games they put on. So sometimes they don't put on everything that you would want. And today we're fortunate we're getting this run line here. We're getting this total. I obviously wouldn't lay minus 335 with the Florida Gators, no matter how good they are. Because like Cincinnati is a team that like they're not in the SEC, but they turn out some talent. And one thing that kind of worries me about them is they can hit. They put on some runs against Brandon Sproat, the Friday guy for Florida, and the bullpen last night. But ultimately, I'm going to take the Gators here with the run line, something I do not like doing, laying the run line with the home team, especially when it's out to 3.5. But you're getting plus money for it. This is a half unit play for me. The Gators are throwing Hurston Waldrep, a.k.a. Hurston Waldrep. He is a top 15 projected prospect. He's probably going to be the third arm off the board this year if I had to put a number on it. This kid is the real deal. Transferred over from Southern Miss, which is why the Golden Eagles were so good last year. I think with the way Florida can hit, with the kind of offense that they have, I feel like 10 runs today should be in the cards. And I just don't know if the Bearcats are going to be able to get more than 3 off Hurston Waldrep, assuming he goes 6 or 7 innings and that bullpen holds up. So I think the minus 3.5 at plus 120 is a fair play, given half a unit on it. I managed to squeak one out when Florida played Charleston Southern last week at a big run line at minus 4.5. But I'm confident that the Gators can roll here today because, dude, they're a daddy wagon. They really are. I think when it's all said and done, they're going to be a top 2, top 3 team in the country. They're going to make a lot of noise. And, on other books, I found them at plus 650 to win the SEC. And I don't think that's unreasonable at all. I think the Gators are in for a big season. And I think they take care of business today against Cincinnati Bearcats.
So we're staying in the SEC, right? A team that's looked pretty good coming out of the gate, South Carolina, even though they've essentially beat up on teams that they're supposed to beat up on. Minus 210 against the Penn Quakers, minus 1.5 on the run line is minus 115. Penn to win is plus 180. Over under is 13.5. What do you see about that South Carolina game, and do you think they're going to make a move up here in the top 25 soon?
Yeah, so South Carolina is a weird team. I didn't necessarily buy them preseason. And, the jury is, there's a lot that remains to be seen when it comes to the Gamecocks because they haven't really played any of these legit schools. Like once SEC play starts in about a month, 5 weeks, whatever it is, or a couple weeks probably, that's what separates the men from the boys. So we're going to see how good this offense really is. We're going to see how good this pitching staff really is. And right now, it seems like they have one of the better rotations in college baseball. They threw Will Sanders last night, who did okay. They had their closest game of the year against Penn last night. They won 7-4. That was the first time all year they've been held to under double-digit runs. And Will Sanders, again, he's another projected first-round pick. But I think ultimately South Carolina is going to pull this out. Noah Hall is going, their Friday guy from last year, who's solid. He's a solid guy. He profiles as a Saturday guy in the SEC for sure. Against Cole Zafiro from Penn. I think the run line's short though. I think 1.5 is. I think that's too small because even though Penn gave them a run for their money last night, just the way the Gamecocks hit, we call them the rake cocks because they could just they mash. They mash taters. They hit the ball. They hit piss missiles. Like I think South Carolina is definitely capable of putting up another 7 or 8 runs today. I think the home run line is fair in this process, and we're getting a 1.5, not a 2.5 like it should be. I think that's valuable, and I feel like taking South Carolina here is something that I'm interested in a full unit play. The one problem is, like, again, DraftKings doesn't put this up. So, honestly, we have to go to an obscure book in Middle America called Saracen. That's where they're offering a lot of these games, and that's where I found South Carolina today, and I had to put it out there because I was like, this play makes too much sense to hit. And, like, it's not a definite smash, but, like, I think there's a better than not chance that this comes home and South Carolina wins by at least 2 runs.
And we're going to wrap up with a game that I believe was postponed yesterday. And I don't know if today's the makeup and they're sliding, but anyway, you'll talk to me about that. The Pac-12. So we're moving away. All your picks of the games today were from the SEC, deservedly so. But Washington's minus 105, minus 1.5 on the run lines, plus 145 against San Jose State. The over-under is 12.5. How do you figure Washington's going to configure after that postponement last night?
So the Huskies are a team that I'm interested in this year only on Fridays. The first game of the series most likely. So they have a freshman by the name of Kiefer Lord. This kid throws gas. He's got a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, and, he's a guy who's going to profile as somebody that's probably going to be, I would say, a highly projected pick in 2025 when he's eligible, if he stays the course. He had 9 or 10 Ks in his debut last week. I think he went 5 innings, 2 runs, if I'm not mistaken. I just feel like Washington is a play here. If we can get Washington at the minus 105 price that they are, which again is the same place that I found South Carolina, I want to take Washington on the money line. I don't agree with the fact that they're underdogs if they have a guy like Kiefer Lord throwing, even if he is in his second game of his collegiate career. The thing is, I want to confirm, though. So this game, I haven't confirmed who the pitchers are, but I wanted to put this out there. If Kiefer Lord is pitching for Washington today for the Huskies, I'm taking them on the money line at minus 105 as an underdog because I don't agree with that. Like, I think Lord, even against a San Jose Spartans team, which, like, they're not one of the best teams in the country. Like, I don't know if I see them having the kind of season that would make them signify of being a favorite at this point in the season against a Washington team. a guy like Kiefer Lord he's a neutralizer. And I think if he is pitching today, that's a team that I would want to back at -105. So assuming that's the case, I'm on Washington, full unit money line play today as an underdog.
Sounds good. Now, let me ask you a question before we start wrapping up here. Are there any other storylines, or is there any other games that you don't plan on betting for Saturday, but you'll plan on eyeing in on just to see what happens?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot of games, especially the ones that I bet yesterday that I'm not touching today. Like Florida State, TCU. I don't want to go back to harp on it too much. That's a game that I'm gonna be looking at to see what exactly is going on, because it should be Cam Brown and I think maybe Carson Montgomery for Florida State. I just don't think I could touch that. I have to see exactly what's going on with TCU, and they might get stymied again because Florida State was pushing a lot of right buttons last night. And while it's unlikely that TCU gets almost blanked 2 nights in a row where they barely scratched across 1 run, I mean, that's a game that I'll be looking at than not betting. I would also say Vanderbilt, UCLA. I didn't have anything in that game last night. I had a lean towards UCLA, but I didn't officially put anything out. And, Matt and myself also yesterday talked about this team. Like, we're not that high on Vanderbilt, but like they're still Vandy. They're still a blue blood college baseball program. They're like the New England Patriots. Tim Corbin has been their coach for 20 years. He's like Bill Belichick of college baseball. And like, even though this team probably isn't as good as they were last year, you still have to respect them. They still have solid pitching. I think they're going to be throwing Hunter Owen today. It's rare because their weekend staff is all lefties. Carter Holton on Friday, who made tremendous strides last year to this year, who earned himself the ace. He's going to look really, really good in 2024 next year with his draft profile. Hunter Owen on Saturdays, and then Devin Fattrell on Sundays. All lefties. I think Vanderbilt is probably a good play today, but that's not something that I'm officially putting out. I need to see because I'm just not sold on Vanderbilt. But like the thing with UCLA is their offense scares me. They're like kind of almost Southern Miss-esque, where like if they don't put up a good pitching performance, they might have a tough time scoring runs against better arms. So that's not really one that I'm looking at to bet today.
All right, this was a lot of fun, pal.
Yeah, listen, it's college baseball, dude. Like, there's a lot of good family fun here on this. It's just sometimes I wish there was more plays out there that I would put out. I was a little upset yesterday, for instance, like Duke was going to be on my card and at -130, -120 earlier in the day, and I didn't pull the trigger on it, and they ended up blowing out Baylor. They put up like 16 runs on them, so I was a little upset at that regard. But overall, it was a solid day. Looking forward to a big one today, and appreciate you hopping on. Before we get out of here, don't forget, you got to sign up for Bet Karma to get unlimited access for the pristine betting and fantasy analysis and picks. Use betkarma.com/JohnnyVTV today. Check out all my good stuff on betkarma.com, including my brand new podcast, Breaking Bet. Once MLB season gets into full swing, we'll be doing it Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So don't miss out. As well as, let's put out the Gambling Guinea's best betting play of today. I'm going to go with the LSU Iowa game under 12.5. I feel like that has to be my best play because I'm really looking forward to what Brody Brecht is going to do for Iowa today. And Riley Cooper he's a good pitcher. So I feel like he could keep Iowa in check offensively. And I think this could be another pitching duel, kind of like the way it started out yesterday, and hopefully goes a little bit further than it did when, in the 6th inning, the wheels started coming off for Kansas State. But dude, LSU's a wagon, bro. They have the #1 college prospect in baseball, Dylan Cruz. Like, he hits absolute rockets. Paul Skeens, back-to-back double-digit punchy games. Like, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with this year. But Joe, before we get out of here, what's your final thoughts heading into this weekend?
Well, I think I mentioned it before, but it seems like the SEC is starting out incredibly strong, like it is every year. Most of the teams ranked in the top 25 are top 10 teams in the SEC. Was curious and intrigued what you were going to say about Florida. considering LSU and Tennessee are right at the top there. So I think Florida, from more of a novice, but somebody who's starting to get involved with it here the last week or so, the 10 days, knowing that we're going to be doing shows and we're going to be doing college baseball shows here through the spring. Very intrigued to see what Florida does. And I think plus 650 for them to win the SEC is a good beginner's value bet. If you're looking just to kind of dip your toes in, follow the top teams, you don't really know anything about it, but you kind of are intrigued by it. You never followed it before. So I'll continue to follow your lead here.
Appreciate it, buddy. So I would say this, and it's not a bad time to start getting involved in the futures market. There's teams that I think you would be behooved to bet now. You could find Rake Forest, 25-1 on Caesars, still 22-1 on DraftKings right now. I think they have a real shot to win it all. I really do. They had a premature exit in the regionals last year. This team is legit. They very well might have the pitcher of the year in Rhett Lauder and the Golden Spike / Dick Hauser trophy winner in first baseman Nick Kurtz. Nick Kurtz could hit 30 tanks this year. Rhett Lauder, he's probably a top 12 pick this year, maybe top 10 if he continues to deliver. I think Wake Forest is a bet. You got to bet him now. As the season goes on, I think their price is going to get lower, most likely, barring like something weird. I think, I've seen a lot of these books where Wake Forest is in the 15 to 20-1 range, which is probably closer to fair price. But if you're getting outside 20-1, you definitely got to take it now before these books kind of catch up. I just don't know if I see Wake Forest not making a deep run because this team is legit. Another team to put a sprinkle on would be Mississippi State, the Bulldogs. Yes, they got blown out yesterday. I think so. My cap of them heading into this year was, and Joe, you remember this, the week of before the Super Bowl, we were talking about Mississippi State. They have 26 freshmen and sophomores. They're a young team. So I kind of predicted they were going to have some growing pains early in the year, but they were going to get stronger as the year goes on. And by now, everybody knows who Durangelo Senchi is. And like we talked about it the week before college baseball started, or 2 weeks before, whatever it was. He's a switch hitter and a switch pitcher, which provides tremendous advantages, especially later in the year. Like this guy could, in theory, just switch to the other side, throws a lefty and then throws a righty the next day. Sits 95 as a righty, 92, 93 as a lefty. So it's a big advantage. And Mississippi State won it all in 2021. So this team has championship pedigree, and at 60-1 right now, that's the price that I'd be looking at taking a sprinkle. I've already added them to the portfolio. And then last team I would say is Grand Canyon, 75-1 still out there, 100-1 in other places. Grand Canyon, I don't think they're going to win it all, but the thing about the Antelopes is they have a really good team. They have a team that's capable of making a deep run. So if you put money on Grand Canyon now at 75-1 and they continue to shrink as the season goes on, I don't necessarily think they're going to win, like I said, but let's say they make it to the Super Regionals and you have a couple of these other winners, you can start creating equity by betting against Grand Canyon. Because if Grand Canyon, let's say Grand Canyon's going against, in the Super Regionals, they're going against like an LSU, or they're going against some of these other teams. Like, chances are they're probably not going to beat an LSU, but they might be getting favorable matchups as well. And then if that's the case, right, Joe, you could take the run lines to get to try and middle it. Like, let's say Grand Canyon's a 2.5 run line favorite against somebody in the supers, then you start betting the other team plus 2.5. Like that's trying to find a way to middle it. So I think that's also a team that you have to take advantage of. But that's all the time for today. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter. I'm at _JohnnyVTV. He's at JCalabrese1. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Don't forget, follow us on Twitter, and I'll continue giving out more plays. We'll see you next week. Best of luck with your bets.